Okay, I'm going to begin. Pajashig, welcome. Welcome to Anishnabe Azejicigan. It's our panel discussion around digital arts, and this panel will be talking to Algonquin artists. Today we have Alice Baudouin from Kitigan-Zibi, Dominic Lafontaine from Temiskaming First Nation, Jay Ojik from Kitigan-Zibi, and Albert Dumont from KZ as well, Kitigan-Zibi. We decided on this name because Jikagan means putting something where it goes, taking something and putting it somewhere. And while we look at, the premise is that while we look at our art and our culture and our language and how we use digital as a tool to work with it, what does that mean to us? How does that look in our community? So before we go any further, I'd like to conduct an opening and introduce myself. Monique Menach, Indijnakas, Algonquins of Barrier Lake, Indojaba. Pajashig, welcome everyone. This panel is being hosted on Algonquin territory. So I'd like to welcome you to our unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We've got some very wonderful artists from this unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory. And so I'm going to do a short opening prayer. Kachimigwich Jemnido, thank you, Creator. Thank you for the plants, for the trees, for the ones who fly, for the ones who swim, for the ones who crawl, for the four-legged, for the feathered, for the furred, and for the two-legged. And thank you for bringing these people together with open hearts, with open minds. Help us to share with each other in a good way. Help us to learn from each other. Help us to be gentle, and help us to be caring, and help us to have a really interesting conversation. Kachimigwich, 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 Kachimigwich. Thank you. Thank you very much. At the end of the evening, Albert Dumont will conduct the closing ceremony. So I'd like to thank you for joining us. And I just want to let you know that all conversations and works shown tonight are for the benefit of you, the artist, and the Indigenous community. However, you do not have the permission to record or screen grab any of the words or works that are shared throughout. If you would like to know more about the artists and their works, please contact me at indigenousinnovations@gmail.com or Anis Descharme at programming@sawvideo.com. And I think we can put those emails in the chat so that people have them, and we will connect you with the artists. So we'd also ask you that if you would please mute your audio while the artists are speaking, and please feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. What we're going to do is, if you can put the questions in chat, then I'll ask you to ask your question so that it comes from you, and whatever you're looking for, or the questions or the discussion, will be in your own words. So I'm going to turn it over to our artists. And actually, I'm not sure, well, if each of the artists would please introduce themselves, and then we can start the presentations and discussions. So Alice, if we could start with you, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Alice Baudouin. I'm from Kitigan-Zibi, which is just about an hour and a half north of here. And I'm a photographer, and I live in Gatineau. And I've been doing photography since 2005. So that's it, that's me.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Dominic, would you like to go?
Yeah, no problem. Hi, Kwe, bonjour. My name is Dominic Lafontaine. I'm from Temiskaming First Nation. Just follow the Ottawa River. Right at the top of that thing, Lake Temiskaming. Um, I'm a multimedia artist. I work in installation, uh, sound art, the basic digital manipulation of images and stuff. Yeah, and I'm just starting to do some 360 work now. So I tried to get that going earlier before we were getting started, but it's not working with my computer and not with my northern connection. That's for sure. All right, looking forward to the talk.
Yeah, those connections are something we can talk about as well. Jay? Jay, are you there?
I'm on my way. I'm waiting for my video to start. Oh, hey.
Hey, there you are.
Hey, Jay Ojik Nandiznikas. Hello, my name is Jay Ojik. I'm also from Kitigan-Zibi, much like Alice. And I'm kind of I would consider myself a jack of all trades, master of absolutely none as it pertains to art. I'm an artist and writer, illustrator, and I've worked in comics, children's books, animation. I had my own television show that aired internationally. And I've also done some teaching. I taught a course on writing for comics and the screen at the University of Ottawa. I was a freelancer for the Ottawa Citizen newspaper. And I'm going to be talking about all those things in just a bit. I'm looking forward to it. And it's great to meet everybody.
Thanks, Jay. Albert Dumont will also be joining us this evening. Where's my camera? He just, there. Great picture, and then it went away. Yeah, he'll be joining us in just a little bit on the phone. His computer, he doesn't have internet where he is, so he'll be talking to us on the phone, and I'll let him introduce himself once he joins us. So if we could start, I'd like each of you if you could talk a bit about your work. And again, I'm going to go back around to the beginning and ask Alice if you could tell us more about your work. And then if you want to go Dominic after that, and then Jay in the same order. And then we'll see if Albert has had a chance to join us by then. Okay.
Alrighty then. So as I mentioned, I started, I took a photography program over at the Algonquin College, and I graduated from there. And so right from there, I went to work at a portrait graduation photography studio over at the University of Ottawa and Carleton University. So after 1 year, I was like, I got this, I can do this on my own. And it was a big learning curve, let me tell you. So I started my photography business, and I did like everything by the book. I incorporated my business. So like I did all this stuff that, you need to do to get a business off the ground, getting the website going and all that stuff. And, but it was slow going. And for me, it took about 5 years for people to finally to recognize, and that's what they say. It takes about 5 years for your work to be noticed in the community. And believe it or not, I've had 2 websites so far, and now I'm free. I'm soaring from free from a website. So I don't have a website right now. So I'm kind of in between. And actually, it's almost like I don't even need a website anymore. So that's something I'm pondering whether I should do another one or not, because there's social media and like on Facebook, and you get a lot of contacts through that as well, right? And I had a Facebook fan page for my work, and yeah, so I kind of took that down, and I'm contemplating rebranding myself. And actually, I'm kind of in between. So as an artist, sometimes it's hard to make a living, right? So I'm taking another course right now in indigenous wellness and addictions prevention program. So I'm doing that, but I definitely will still keep on with my photography. I'm going to show you some images that I've taken over the years. And I'm going to share. Can you see that? Yeah, okay. All right. So, yeah, so just some basic work. So a lot of my work, I like for it to show, well, obviously I like to take pictures of Anishnabe people and our culture, our heritage, you know, who we are. And this is way at summer kitchens, way out in the territory. We have summer kitchens, and so this is one shot after a big feast. And this is just living on the land. And this is my cousin Jacob Awadi. I think it's really important. I think photos are really important, especially when people have passed on. You know, it preserves their memory. So I really found that out throughout the years that I've been taking photos. They're a little cutie. So I do everything from powwows. I don't know what this is, more art, portraits, landscape. Our new chief in Kitigan Zibi, I took his photo. So I do some portraits. There's our famous chef in our community, Chef Sezin Mowate from Mowate Catering. So I do newborn, maternity, babies. I even do boudoir, but I didn't ask anybody's permission to put it up today. So that's just some of them. So these women, the woman with the red blanket is my mother, and the woman on right beside her is her best friend, and she passed away last year. So it's really important to take pictures. Beautiful memories. So families, 4 generations. So I do events. This was before an event, weddings, food, and that's about it. So I'm going to stop sharing here. All right, so yeah, this is a talk about technology. I think a lot of technology has advanced our ability to capture our art in different ways. I love digital camera. You know, you get that instant gratification, and you're able to manipulate in, well, I don't like to manipulate. I just basically retouch a bit. Yeah, so I don't like to do any over manipulation of digital images. I just like to retouch a bit in color correct and that kind of stuff. And another big thing is I think how we store images. I think everybody knows this, right? Everybody takes digital pictures, and you know, most of us don't print them anymore. well, maybe we'll print a few. And so, yeah, so we have a lot of stored images on our devices, right? And I have like, I think I'm on my I'm on my third big hard drive now of my images. So I buy a pretty big storage devices for all my images because I shoot raw. And yeah, I don't know. Does anybody have any any questions?
Liz, if you want to go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, hi, go ahead.
Well, she just muted herself. You have to unmute.
Oh,
There you go.
I thought I was already muted. Sorry. So I was just wondering if you had a gallery exhibition of your photography, like in an artist run center or maybe a tier 1 gallery.
Yeah, no, I don't. I could pursue that, I guess, but I don't. I haven't really, no, I haven't done that.
And so have you written a grant for Canada Council or the Ontario Arts Council or?
No, I have not. I have not.
Okay.
No, not
Is
yet.
there, how come?
I don't know. I've been thinking about it. I'm busy right now. I'm taking a full-time course right now, a 2-year course, so I'm busy with that, but I've been contemplating it. I have an idea about something that I want to do creatively.
Okay, thanks.
So that's
Thanks,
it for
Val.
my talk. If anybody has any other questions, that's it for me.
I'm hoping that we can also have time to have a good group discussion after all the presentations are done too. So, Dom, if you could present, that would be terrific. Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to share the screen right off the bat. That's gonna just was hoping it works. It worked earlier. All right, here we go. All right, so as I said, that's all the about stuff about myself. That's Franco-Ontarian and Algonquin, so I kind of live in between worlds, really, like French and English, and that was what you see on the thing right there. That's a poster for one of our gatherings that we had. So I use digital tools in different ways. My motto is research, remix, repeat. So I'll take an idea, just let it whirl around in my brain, play around with it, break it apart, bring it back in, and see what happens. As I said, I work in installations. This is one that I had a chance to do with Jessie Short. It's a makeshift artist out of, well, she's out of Calgary right now, but I think she's originally from Saskatchewan. So this was with the National Film Board and Open Space Gallery. That was the show. That's just last year, last spring, summer. I don't even know what the days or seasons are anymore. So as you can see, this is not actually digital work. It's actually lo-fi video work. These are video feedbacks that are going off of those are big sheets of Mylar, like chip bags. It's pretty much the same stuff, or the stuff that they use in a grow ops in big gardens, indoor gardens. So I was lucky to be a part of that with Jessie and 2 other native artists who are francophone, living outside of Quebec. Luckily, my traditional land is in Quebec and Ontario, so they accepted me. So we got a chance to go to Winnipeg to try it out, and then we were lucky we got a show like within 2-3 months, and we brought it over to Victoria. It was really fun. Here's a few shots from this is a group show that I was part of last year. It's in the Rouen at the MA, the Musée d'Art. It's just about 100 kilometers from here. Here's just a detail from one of the pieces. This is just some basic Photoshop work. It was part of the the official year of Indigenous languages last year. So that was the theme of the show. And this just shows the dominance of what language since the starting of Quebec City. Because, I like to put a little joke in there. There's a little fake native there under there. I can't see because of the thing right here. And these are all kids this is for Halloween costumes. These are what the pictures are. So I often put a little joke in what I'm doing most of the time, actually. If it's either super serious or it's super ridiculous. Speaking of super serious, this is another piece that's digital manipulation. It's just it's a piece of the Massacre of Wounded Knee, and I was doing research, and what happened is I came across this line, what are we, a lot of sleeping Indians to take a thing like this laying down? Because I was looking at the word Mahmut, which is a groundhog. It's a whole other story, and that's an old translation from a movie, and I just came across it. I was like, oof, there's something, I can do something pretty mean with this, or I don't know, there's something biting in there. As I said, I go from serious to funny. That's 9 Lives, Cat's Eyes. Let's see, it's a quote from an AC/DC song. It's actually, the piece is about reincarnation and the circle of life. And those little cats do this, all of them. They kind of line up sometimes. It's pretty creepy. And the other one's Dans un Album, which is actually it makes reference to the Greek art. There's a lot of stuff in Greek art that has this motif of men fighting in a circle, which again, the cycle of war and all that. But what I'm here really to talk about is my latest show called Diffusion Suffusion. It's taking part at the L'Écart, which is a artist-run center in Rouyn-Noranda. It's currently on exhibition right now till the end of the month. And now I'm going to show you what it actually looks like, because this is the nice clean 360 camera. Like, I just bought this fancy camera and it's super nice and it's great. But I'm going to go show you what it actually looks like in the real tone. Okay, so here it is in action. Make this a little bigger. Can everybody, I hope everybody sees this. So everything is based on the one image on the left. Everything else is a repetition of it in some different way. It's all kind of a remix of that one light, the feedback that's inside of it. So it's very, I could go on about the whole technicality for it, but essentially it's just a bunch of repeating feedback loops that almost end up dancing with each other. And with the Mylar, you see it's reflective. It's more, I've just kept on working on the other stuff that I was doing with the Jesse. I love this. I don't know, there's something about that material that's really great. So we'll close that for now. And that's pretty much it. I wanted to do a 360 tour. I have the video footage, but apparently my computer doesn't have the bandwidth or anything like that. But what I mainly work when it comes to digital is there's always a mix. There's some kind of there's always a remixing. Really, it's really about that. Whether it's like really lo-fi, or I always try to find what's broken inside the tech one, because it's supposed to be also perfect and everything. Because if you see that where is it? Did I put that? Oh, there you go. Okay. Oh, I'm not sharing it, am I? Sorry about that. All right. Sorry. Okay, so if you see that this little symbol here, that's a drum cymbal. I just put it there because it's just by accident. I just put it down, and there's what you see, that the little black box is actually it's a laptop. What is the laptop's? Okay, it's got its camera going through the little hole of the drum, the drum cymbal, and that's feeding it on itself, and the rest of it is all cameras. It's one camera picking up that feedback, and turning it over to the other ones, and they're all bouncing all over the place. So you can see it's simple, but it's kind of complicated. That's kind of my approach, really. Complicated to the point where you finally find the simplicity in it. And that's about it, yeah.
Oops, thanks. I did it again. Well, thanks, Tom. Does anybody have any questions? I'm not seeing any in the chat. Yep, Liz, go ahead.
I was going to say, Dom, I know Jesse. Is the work going to tour elsewhere? Like you said, Rwanda?
Rwanda.
Wrong. Yeah.
So it's 100 kilometers north from here. So it's how can I explain it? From Ottawa, you have to go through the park north all the way up.
Oh, I thought it was Rwanda.
No, not Rwanda. Although, hey,
like, wow, that's awesome. How'd you do that?
Well, I've been to Israel for a virtual reality art delegation last year.
Oh,
wow.
I
Yeah,
was supposed to go to Israel this year, but
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah. It's not that far out of Val-d'Or, really, is it? Rwanda,
No, it's two hours away.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's an hour away from Rwanda. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Hey,
Well,
I have a question if I can.
Yeah.
Sure.
Dom, your work with the drum and the light going through that that you use that kind of bit of media that you've created and then reused it in many parts. Is there meaning attached to you for that? For you attached to that?
Well, it's I forgot to say it was part of a residency. So I had tons of time because it was COVID. So it's like it's an hour away from my house. I wasn't working. So I'm like, okay, well, everything lined up at the right times. So I got into that residency, and I also got into a virtual residency at the same time in public art. So that's so it was really a residency, and the approach was really just exploring. I just wanted to use that one the one material, lights, projectors, because all those projectors are, well, the ones that do have projectors, those are all old. They're all like I had a TV break on me. I had a whole bunch of stuff. Is one of those, and eventually, and like the last part there that kind of looks like wings there, that kind of does this.
Mm-hmm.
That only came like a week before the show. It's just after all the work, I finally just. I think once you start working on stuff like that, like especially if it's one space, and I had like 2 months. I wasn't there every day there or anything, but at least once a week I was there for 2 days, 3 days. So it kept on building, it kept on breaking, kept on building, and eventually I was like, okay, I know what this dance is. I know what's going on now, and a lot of it is like we're saying in French, pur hasard. It's random. A lot of the random, just playing with the random.
And then kind of forming it into something.
In a way, yeah. Just kind of a actually it's a lot like music to me. This one, as the that feedback loop is kind of like a synthesizer signal generator.
Okay.
That's kind of the theme of the thing, and it just gets getting repeated, and according to whatever, like the camera that I'm using beside it to catch for the other pieces is an old VHS camera, and because it's slow, the signal going to the other projector has a delay on it, so it kind of do that, and the other one's, that's a webcam. I put a webcam on it, and that one catches both of them I know it's hard to explain it, but Skype me. I can give you a whole hour of this stuff. But it's a lot of it's technical, but it's not really. It's very low tech in a sense. It's just sensors, emitters, do that.
That is very cool.
Is there sound with it? Like, is there a background music at all?
Not that one. That one there's not. The first one I showed there, the one in Victoria and Winnipeg, that does have sound on it. Those are sounds. The one in Winnipeg is sound of lake ice cracking in one of the lakes out there, and we slowed it down so it's only bass. So it just does like it's really meditative. It really slows you down. And the one in Victoria, I did that one. And what I did is I taped the sound of waves, but not the low part, the high part, the sizzle. Then I slowed that down. That gave like this weird like it was like kind of like almost like hard to explain. It's almost like whales, but not really. kind of whales went like boo like that. And then it's something along those lines. and that was the one for that one. And that piece is with Jesse. We both decided that sound wise, no matter what place it goes, we're gonna take a sample from that place and play with it. It was actually supposed to be I'm not supposed to say it, but it was over at the NFB, the new building in Montreal. There was word it might have happened. It might have happened this year, but it couldn't because of all these things. But I got some good projects coming up in the next year. Fingers crossed. Oh. Can you hear ya?
Oops, I think you didn't hear that. Thank you. That was amazing. That work is really interesting. It's
Thanks.
I love how the various texts are all integrated. It's a different approach I haven't really seen. So now we're going to go over to Jay. Jay, if you could please tell us about your work and about yourself. And
Awesome.
like,
So before I begin, I'd like to thank Alice and Dom for sharing their art. You both are very talented, and it was cool to learn about your work. You'll have to bear with me. I'm a little tired. I've had a long day. I had a book come out today, so I did quite a few interviews to promote the new book, and I'm kind of running out of steam at this point. I was guzzling coffee earlier, so this presentation brought to you by Tim Horton. So yeah, I'm an artist and writer, and I think for myself, I really came to art as a means of storytelling. That's what brought me to it, because I wanted to tell stories, and it came to be that way because even though I'm from Kitigan-Zibi, which is my dad's community, I was born in Rochester, New York. And if you've ever been to Rochester, I'm glad you got out okay. It's great that you did. It's a bit of a rough city. But where we lived, right up the street from us, literally like a couple of doors down, there was a comic book shop, and we didn't have a lot of money. My dad was working construction. He ended up all like a lot of guys from the reserve. He left young to work, and he did a lot of construction up and down the East Coast. So he was all over the place. And when we were in Rochester, the comic book shop up the street had this thing they would do where they'd take books that didn't sell and rip off the cover and sell them for like 5 cents. So as a little kid, without a lot of money, that was awesome, because we'd walk in the store, walk out with like 5 comics, roll them up, stick them in your back pocket. And now some of those books would be worth a lot of money if they had covers. But because they don't have any cover, they're not even worth the 5 cents I paid for them. But it was really cool. And that's how I kind of came to learn to read. I learned to read at a pretty young age. And according to my mother, she says I started writing full stories when I was around 5 years old. My caveat to that is I don't think they were any good. I'm not sure they still are. But for sure, when I was 5, they were not very good. Because really, when you're a 5-year-old, what do you have to talk about, right? Like, what is your life experience that you need to share with the world as a 5-year-old? Like, ice cream is yummy or something? So it's kind of weird. But I remember looking at comics, and discovering those little boxes they would have on the inside, like front page, where it would say like the different positions of creators of the books. So it'd say like written by, penciled by, inked by, colored by, lettered by. And I remember going like, oh, so it's not like one person who does all of this, even though it can be. There's these different jobs, and trying to figure out like, what does the inker do? And what does this mean? How does the letterer work? And at the time, because I'm older than I look, I like to think the books were actually all done analog. They weren't digitally done yet. So the lettering was done by hand, and the coloring was done with markers and stuff like that. And they did some really, really cool stuff in those days. The business side of comics has changed to an extent, because now you have graphic novels and things that are just a completed book that will come out, and you can put more time into it and really go to town on the artistic side of things. Whereas in those days, in the 70s, books were only monthly, so they were coming out every month, and guys, couldn't go into as much detail as they might have liked to. So the books were a little rushed. So anyway, all that being said, I wanted to draw comics, and I figured out from a pretty early age that was one of the things I really wanted to do. But to me, as a kid growing up on the res, because we moved to the reserve when I was around 5, we moved to KZ. And to me, the entire comic book industry was just located in the United States, specifically in New York. And it seemed like it seemed like another world entirely. It seemed like something that you couldn't reach, that wasn't tangible. And I remember at one point, I think I was like 10 years old, and my older brother subscribed to a Marvel comic called G.I. Joe, if anybody remembers the G.I. Joe toys. And so even though we couldn't find a lot of comic books, Kitigan Zibi is in Quebec, right next to a town called Maniwaki, and there's not a lot of English books there, if any. So it was hard to come by comic books and things, which was vastly different from having a comic book shop just up the street from where we lived. It was a huge, huge cultural change for an inner city kid. And so my brother was subscribing to these comics. So every month Marvel would ship the latest issue of G.I. Joe to us. And I remember creating my own characters, like based off of, they weren't very creative, mind you. They were all very derivative, let's say. But I remember drawing a few of those characters and sending them to Marvel Comics, because I think as a kid, you're not bound by limitations the way you get to be when you're older. Anything is possible for a kid. And I remember drawing these characters and sending them to Marvel and saying, hey, I created some characters. If you want to use them in your comic, go ahead. Which was very precocious and cute for a 10-year-old. But as an adult creator who makes a living doing this, I'm like, you were just going to give away intellectual property for free? What's wrong with you, boy? But I thought it would be cool. And I actually got a letter back from Marvel. So I got my first rejection letter from Marvel Comics when I was 10 years old. And I remember my mother walking into my bedroom. And I don't know about the rest of you, but when I was 10 years old, I didn't get a lot of mail. So my mom walks in my bedroom and she's like, hey, you've got mail. And I'm like, what? So unless it was like Santa Claus writing back to you to let you know he couldn't get you that helicopter you asked for, who was going to write to a 10-year-old kid? And I remember Spider-Man being on the envelope and then opening it up. And there's a little drawing of Spider-Man on the letterhead. And the letter was from a Marvel editor. And it said, Dear Jay, we appreciate your enthusiasm and passion for drawing comics. However, your skills are not quite at the Marvel level just yet. And to me, there was no sense of disappointment. To me, it just came down to you could reach out and touch it. Couldn't see it. It was far away. But someone could see your work, and it was tangible, and it could be real. And that, I think, really made it more real in my head that maybe someday. And it gave me some hope. And it gave me something where a lot of the guys I grew up with wanted to, for example, play in the NHL. Now, we've had Indigenous players in the NHL, but the odds of making that are very tough, especially if you're like me and you don't skate very well. So for me, though, the benefit of living in a place with really, really sucky, harsh winters and not being a very good skater is that I spent a lot of time indoors learning to draw and write. And I remember thinking at the time, well, maybe someday this is something that we can do. So I started doing my own comic book series. I don't remember how old I was. I was probably in like my early 20s or something. And maybe this is something I'd like to ask the other artists here about. But I remember hearing when I was in my early 20s and I was looking to get started, I just remember hearing all the time about how there's all this money for Native people. there's grants for Native people, there's money for Native people. And I don't think it's as accessible as most people think. And I don't mean to besmirch any funding agencies, but it can be hard, especially if you're a kid from a res, to learn how all of that works and to get acclimated with all of that. And I almost came to resent the idea that people were kind of saying, without coming out and saying it, there's all this money for Native people, we just don't access it. And it kind of became an issue for me. And I'm a very stubborn person by nature. So when it came time for me to get started, I approached this comic books as I was going to start my own business, a publisher. I was going to start a small publishing company. And I didn't want to access any Indigenous funds. So I applied for a program that was open to any Canadian. And I took out a small business loan and I got started as a publisher. And that led me to promoting this comic book series that I was creating and running out of my own basement. I started going to comic conventions. And when you go, if you're not familiar with comic conventions, there's really two aspects of the showroom floor. There's the publishing part, and on the other end is what they call Artist Alley. And Artist Alley is kind of the back of a room where they shove all the artists and they just have a tiny little cramped table and the lines are really thick and the publisher's booths are huge. And I'm like, why would I want to pay money for an Artist Alley table when I can buy a publisher's booth and have way more space and it'll be way more accessible? So I started getting publishing booths in order to get my stuff out there more. And what I found was I was making way more industry connections. So I started with this book called The Raven. I brought that to Canada's largest comic book publisher, a company called Arcana Comics. After 3 issues of my own series, we created a graphic novel. I created a graphic novel there called Kagagi the Raven. So Kagagi is Algonquin for Raven because, again, me being stubborn, I was talking with a comic book shop owner and he told me a book with an Indigenous character wouldn't sell. And I said, really? How can you say that when it's never been done? What are you basing this off of? It makes no sense to me. And this is what he told me. He said, well, books with non-white characters tend to not sell well. Okay, such as. And he said, well, the Hulk is green and the Hulk doesn't sell very well. And I said, the Hulk is not from the gamma radiation tribe. The Hulk is like some kind of monster. You can't equate this seriously. So doubling down on it, I called the book Raven in Algonquin because I wanted to put a stamp on it. Rather than just try and hide that, I wanted to wear it on our sleeve and say, yes, this is an Indigenous superhero comic. And where Kagagi was of note in the comic book industry or the history of comics was that Kagagi was the first comic book with a Native hero created by Native people to be carried through the distributor called Diamond, which distributes to comic stores across North America. So we were using the same distributor as Marvel, as DC, and we were available in every comic book shop across North America. To this day, Kagagi is the only Indigenous comic book created by Indigenous people that can say that. And the book is like 10 years old or something. So doing that brought me, from that, we started looking at things saying, at that time, because a few years ago, you were starting to see the proliferation of comic book TV shows and movies. There hadn't been a lot at that time. And we started saying, okay, well, maybe somebody is interested in doing an Indigenous superhero TV show or film. And according to every Indigenous film and television producer we met, I was super off base because nobody wanted anything to do with it. So I started my own production company. And partnering up with the guy who owned the publisher Arcana, we created a production company and we pitched the series to APTN. We got it picked up here in Canada. So Kagagi the Raven aired for 1 season in Canada, as well as on FNX First Nations Experience in the United States and a network called NITV in Australia. And Kagagi, I think, was noteworthy because I realized we had an opportunity to do something really meaningful for kids here because the show was primarily designed as entertainment, not education. So I wanted the show to be made with a version in Algonquin. So we did one version of the show 100% in Anishnabe Moine and one with 20% Algonquin so that teachers and parents could use this as a learning tool. The kids, it would be a show that kids would want to watch because when I would see educational resources, a lot of the time as a kid, it would feel like somebody was trying to teach me. And whenever it felt like somebody was trying to teach me, I would kind of back away. So we wanted to almost trick kids into learning, if that makes sense. And so we did the show, and we didn't have, because of the nature of television in Canada, we didn't have a large budget. So I had to fund the Algonquin version of Kagagi myself out of pocket. So one of the things that I thought we could do with it was to give youth a chance to work on a television show that would be broadcast internationally. We went through ICMI in Kitigan-Zibi, and we hired youth to do the Algonquin voiceovers. So all of the voiceover recording was done by youth in Kitigan-Zibi to give them a chance to work on a show that was actually going to be aired on TV. And how that relates to digitally is the show was not only digitally put together because it was a 3D animation show, but I had to be in Kitigan-Zibi a lot of the time working with the voiceover cast there, while the rest of my crew was in Vancouver, and they were recording the English voiceovers in Gastown. So at ICMI, they were running at the time out of a former corner store. So on the one coast in Kitigan-Zibi, we were recording the Algonquin voiceover out of what used to be the beer cooler. They soundproofed it and created a soundproof room out of a beer cooler. On the other coast, we were recording the English voiceover at Brian Adams' studio in Gastown, complete with a major recording studio and a green room. So just, you find ways to make things work, and digital stuff has made a lot possible for me. I'm going to wrap up because I know I'm probably going way too long here. I'm sorry, I lose track of time. But so I at this point, I pretty much work all digitally when it comes to illustration. So that's been a major help for me because I remember as a kid not knowing what kind of drawing equipment and drawing gear I needed. And I would go into an art store like a Wallach's or something and just be overwhelmed by all the stuff. Like, how do I know which brushes do I buy? Which pens do I buy? What paper is best? Like, I don't know. So nowadays I work completely on Apple products. Most of my drawing is done on an iPad Pro. And it's something where you can just find YouTube tutorials and learn in a way that we couldn't when I was younger. So that's one way that digital has really impacted my work. So I'll show you some pictures from some stuff I've done. Take a look at that if I can figure out how this works. I'm a bit of a caveman, bear with me. There we go. Is that, I don't know if that's working. I hope so. Yeah, okay, thanks, Tom. So this is the cover to a book called Black Flies, which I drew. Came out in 2017. Black Flies was a national bestseller here in Canada. It's available in the United States as well. Written by Canadian author Robert Munch. Black Flies is a noteworthy book because it also is set in an Indigenous community with an all First Nations cast of characters. So this was #2 on the national bestseller list throughout the summer of 2017. And actually was reprinted in an edition, in a special collection of Munch titles called Bunch of Munch, which came out today, actually, which is why I was doing media earlier. In terms of digital work, this is something I've been working on with the Nisga'a First Nation out in British Columbia. We're taking some of their traditional stories and adapting them into picture books because we think it's important for First Nations youth to see our own stories told in the same way as these high-end picture books and things that are available. So we're doing a story, and this one pertains to the story of how the beaver and the porcupine came to be friends. So here's one of them swimming. And just in terms of digital stuff, you can see there's kind of a gradient with like a light source on the top and stuff I like to do when I'm working digital. You can do a lot with, 60, 70 layers. I lose track at half the time. So Robert and I followed up Black Flies with Bear for Breakfast, Makwa Kaji Kajebawasinian, which is an important book because this also was published in Algonquin. So for Black Flies, Robert and I both waived our rights to any royalties if a First Nation wants to publish the book in their own language. And so basically, if they want to, any Indigenous community wants to publish the book, they can without having to worry about any legality regarding Robert and I. But I thought we could do more. So I asked Scholastic, I said, hey, look, we're doing the book in English and French. Let's do one in Algonquin as well, because I think we can provide another resource. So I've tried to use my work, my art, to try to provide those kind of resources to people, because there's just not a lot of resources for people to learn the Algonquin language. So in addition to that, Scholastic put out a audiobook of Bear for Breakfast with the Algonquin version so people can hear the pronunciation and the way it works. So I've tried to do those things because when we made Kagagi, the TV show, like I said, we created a version completely in Algonquin. In the time since, one of our two translators who adapted the story into Algonquin has passed away. And the other one is actually a cancer survivor who dealt with cancer after the production. And I realized if we were going to do a show like that again, we wouldn't be able to do it the same way. And we're losing our speakers at an alarming rate. So I'm trying to do what I can in terms of providing entertainment in the Algonquin language. And I've done a series on Twitter called the Algonquin Word of the Day, where I illustrated digital flashcards with the Algonquin text underneath, simple words, just like we did one that was the alphabet series, one that was based on wildlife. And like Alice was talking about social media, that's something we did strictly on Twitter. And through Twitter, you can track the analytics of things. And we were doing 17,000 impressions a day with every Algonquin Word of the Day. So it shows that there's a market for people who want to learn the language. And so that's about it. I mean, I think I've gone way over time, and I apologize for that. Again, I'm sorry, I'm running on fumes at this point, but that's basically it, and my career and my work, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. That's absolutely amazing. And I think a lot of the issues and things that you brought up are things that we want to talk about after. But I think right now we have Albert on the line. Are you there, Albert?
I'm here. You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you could introduce yourself and then talk about your work.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Albert Dumont. My grandfather was Samson Commanda. He took the name Dumont, we think around 1920 or somewhere around there, but really don't know why he took the name Dumont, but he did. And so I guess about me is two important things is that I had severe addiction issues up until over 32 years ago. I sobered up, and I don't have much of an education. I've got a grade 7 education, and I worked most of my life as a bricklayer, stonemason. But after my sobriety began, I started to get involved with a lot of things, with human rights activism, Indigenous spirituality. But I also started writing poetry, and I always loved artwork. So I've kept it up as a hobby. I always liked to, as a hobby, I did single panel cartooning. I've got quite a collection of single panel cartoons. I've never published them yet, but maybe someday I will. I just finished a project. I was commissioned by the city of Ottawa to write a story on West Nile and disease and Lyme disease and West Nile virus for the city of Ottawa. And so I wrote the story. It's a children's story. It takes place in Kitigan Zibi, and I also did the drawings for it too. So that book is just out there now. The city bought 1,000 copies from Anishnabe printing. So very proud of that. What I wanted to mention to you this evening is that I think it was probably around 1994 or somewhere around there that I was at a powwow, and I happened to admire some wares of this couple who were selling ceramics. And so I got talking to them, and they had different designs on their plates and cups. And I said, I like developing logos. And the lady said, oh, you should try to do a Turtle Clan logo, because a lot of people ask me about turtles. And she said, if you ever do a Turtle Clan designs, he says, get a hold of me and we'll see if we can work something out. So I went home and within a few days, I drew a pen and ink design of what to me was a symbolic of a turtle clan. And so I had a contact for them, and the next time they were in the Ottawa area with their ceramics, I went and showed them the design I did. So they took the copy of it, and I didn't hear any more about it for quite a while. I think probably about a year went by, and then all of a sudden people were coming to me and they were saying, "Hey Albert, we saw your Turtle Clan design in the airport in Vancouver." Or somebody would say, "Albert, I saw your Turtle Clan design in New Brunswick at a shop," and so on. Hey, so I got a hold of those people, and I said that hadn't talked to me about royalties, and so we had a conversation about royalties. They agreed that they would give me 50 cents in every sale they made. And a year went by, and I didn't get any royalty check. So I called up that lady, and I said to her, I said, "I'm going to give you 2 months to clear the shelves of any design I did," because she was putting my design on one side of a cup and a poem that I wrote on the other side of the cup. And then, or she would have just a Turtle Clan design on a plate. And even on canisters for flour and coffee canisters, and there was the Turtle Clan design was on those. So I told her, I said, "I'm giving you 2 months to clear the shelves, and if anybody tells me, or if I see with my own eyes, not my design or anything that you made," I said, "you're going to be hearing from a copyright lawyer." And she accused me of being drunk. She said, "You're drunk, eh? You're drunk." And I said, no, I'm not drunk. I'm very sober." And I said, I'm just telling you that what's going to happen if you don't stop using my what I created without giving me royalties. So that was the end of that. And I never did get a penny for whatever sales that she had made. And by the way, I know for a fact that there was a treatment center in Toronto that was buying a lot of cups from her, because the poem on one of the cups that she was selling was a poem I wrote for sobriety. Actually, it was the first poem I ever wrote, and it was on the cup. So she was not only using my Turtle Clan design, but also my poetry to make money, but I never got a nickel. Another time, a friend of mine was on the internet and saw my poem, Shumaganish. I wrote a poem in the 90s to honor Indigenous soldiers who died overseas during the wars, the First World War and the Second World War. And so I wrote a poem called Shumaganish, and somebody had it on their website, and they had the poem Shumaganish, but they had author unknown under it. So I contacted them and I said, "Look, I've got no problem with you having a poem on your website, but I said, you've got to put my name under it, because I wrote that poem." And I asked the copyright lawyer about it, and the copyright lawyer said, "Well, whenever somebody will see a poem and it fits with whatever they're promoting or whatever they're doing, and they don't want to contact the author of it because they're worried that they're not going to get permission, or they're worried that it's going to cost them something, so they just say author unknown, and then if something happens, then they just say, 'Oh, sorry, we found this poem, and whenever we saw it, it didn't have any name on it, and that's why it's there,' and and then they have an opportunity to remove it or whatever." Anyway, that's what happened with that. So a couple of things, Somebody will steal your designs. Somebody else will pillage a poem that you wrote, and and meanwhile the creator of it is left short. You know, and it's just too bad that's the world we live in. But there should be more stricter things, you know, that happen to people who would rob a struggling artist, right? Anyways, it's not that I'm a struggling artist, you know. I live in a nice little house here on the reserve, and it's bought and paid for, and I'm happy about it. Anyways, that's some of the things, and I wanted to just tell you something that about Indigenous people and how we're inspired and what motivates us. So the other day I was in the forest behind my house, and so I was walking along very quietly on in the bush road, an old bush road. And the reason why I was walking so quietly is I was wondering if I'd see a deer. And I didn't have a gun with me, and I wasn't. I don't hunt anymore. I enjoy to see animals and birds in the bush. So I was walking along quietly, and all of a sudden I heard a bird take flight, maybe about 30 feet from where I was. I didn't see the bird, but I knew it was a partridge because I know partridge. I know lots of things about partridge. I used to be quite the partridge hunter a while back, but I haven't hunted anything for over 15 years. And actually, I would never hurt a partridge ever because they're my spiritual helpers. They come to me in dreams and tell me stuff in dreams, and which I'm very grateful for their messages. But it made me think, about whenever the partridge took off, I knew it was a partridge without seeing it, because whenever they're on the ground and they take flight, they beat their wings in such a way that it's unmistakable. It's no other bird makes a sound like them. You know, I don't know if it's the length of their wings or how the speed in which they flap their wings whenever they leave the ground. But anyways, I knew that it was a partridge. And it made me think that a sound, you know, what we hear, and stuff that we never really appreciated before. Like we appreciate a song on the radio. We appreciate maybe a lover saying "I love you," or your children and grandchildren laughter and things like this here, and that's one thing. But to hear the forest though, like the partridge taking flight, and then later on, and there'd been a heavy mist that night. I think it went down to about -4 or 5 in Maniwaki. And the leaves were falling, and the leaves were dry, and they were making contact with shrubs on closer to the forest floor, and raspberry plants, and they were making a sound, and it so inspired me to create poetry and maybe a drawing of these things, and to talk about how wonderful it is that the sounds of the forest, you know, that are distinctly there for the forest, and human beings should be going there more to absorb it and to benefit from it emotionally and spiritually. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Anyway, I guess that's it for me. I don't know if how much time I had, but if you want me to keep talking, I will, and if not, that's good too. Here, anyways, pass it back to you.
Thanks, Albert. We have that image that we have up on the screen there is the image that was plagiarized by that woman to be put. So if you see any mugs or plates or anything like that with that image on it, you know that image that has been taken. And that's, you know, that's something that I wanted to talk to everybody about too, about how 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 can we protect, you know, and has this been an issue for you in your work? And feel free, let's just have a conversation. Feel free to speak up, and you know, instead of you know, me pointing at people, maybe if we can just have just a conversation about this. So has this sort of thing happened, and you know, what kind of, how can we protect our culture with, you know, we're more and more we're working with the digital tool, more and more our work and our culture and our language is being put online and being put out there, and but how do we protect ourselves? So if anybody wants to jump in, feel free.
Well, when you say protect ourselves, what do you mean? Like, I'm not sure I follow.
Well, for example, in Albert's case, where his image was taken, or where you see, you know, in the Plains Cree, for example, there are some teepees that have images on them. Now, those images are passed down through families, and only certain people, and they have stories attached to them, and only certain people are permitted. They've inherited that, or they've been bestowed that, to put those images on their teepees. So when someone comes along and takes a picture of them and then starts putting them on T-shirts, you can see that that's the culture really that's being taken and plagiarized, or our stories, you know, our stories being online. I've opened a number. I was thinking about this one place where I was with teachers. I was doing an opening, and I told a story that had been gifted to me, and I credited the person who gave it to me. But at the end of it, the teacher came up to me and said, "Oh, you know, can I tell that story? I want to make puppets and have the kids, you know, make puppets." And I just said, "Well, make sure that please, you know, I've been given permission to tell that story. I can't pass that. That's not my call. And I would recommend that you have somebody in the classroom with you who knows that story, or who can speak to that story, as opposed to just her taking the story and telling the story and having the kids, because there's so much in it that you know, our stories are so value based and culturally what they're teaching tools. So to have them, like, you know, we risk when we put that out there that they'll be used in ways that we don't intend. And I'm just wondering if anyone has dealt with that, with their images, with their work, or how you see yourself. How do you protect yourself from that sort of thing? Did I make sense at all? Okay. Dom, do you want to go, and then Liz?
Oh, okay.
So I haven't had to deal with that yet, but I do have.
Where that lady took the my image I did of a turtle clan, I would have been more careful to put stuff in writing. I would have wanted to know exactly what she intended to do with the design. The arrangements would have been made and maybe notarized or whatever. So I definitely would be able to protect myself in the future when it comes to that kind of stuff. But back in the 1990s, I really didn't know anything. I'd only been sober for a few years, and I was easy pickings, I guess, for that lady to take that design, and she made money from it. And I never got a nickel.
Yeah. And something else that I wanted to bring up with you to have a conversation about was the idea of these digital tools, and how do they impact your work? You know, Jay, you were saying that it was pen and ink. You know, Alice, you were talking about now you're using the digital format. So how has this changed the way you work? and how when you think about the idea that it can make you more vulnerable or the work more vulnerable, but does that impact how you use this digital tool?
Well, if I could touch on the how do we protect ourselves thing real quick, I think we have to make a distinction between protecting our own works and intellectual properties and protecting the culture. Because I think there's more tangible things we can do stuff about because we could establish ownership of our own works in a way that's a little tougher to do using legal systems in modern society. Certain things, once we introduce them to the digital world, I think we have to just accept we can't always control what's going to happen with them. So, for example, like with the Kagagi TV show, my business partner was really, really paranoid about the show being pirated. And I was like, it's a matter of time. It's going to happen. There's nothing you can do. You can try to slow it down. You can try to make it more difficult, but I look at it a bit like a safe or a lock, in that there's no such thing as a safe that can't be broken into. There's just safes that take a lot longer to get into if somebody really wants to. And it just comes down to, for me with the TV show, and I'm only talking about specifically, not an example like a piece of artwork I've created that's being appropriated, or a cultural appropriation is not what I'm talking about. But insofar as something like a television series or a film or something like that, the digital world is just too easy for people to manipulate and to co-opt. And we just need to understand that anything digital is information, and it's not really always possible to prevent the flow of information once we put it out there, I think.
I'm going to ask Dom.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I think you're right. I'm going to ask Dom, and then I'm going to go to Liz after that.
How digital has changed things for me? It's huge. I could go places where I don't physically need to be at. I have a telepresence that is just great. Like, as I was saying earlier, I was in 2 residences at once without leaving my region. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's crazy. And just today actually, there's this talk here, and earlier before that, I was talking to the facilitator, I guess would be the word, of the last residency I did, the virtual one. Now we're on to our phase 2 for it. So for me, being a guy who's 500 kilometers away from Ottawa, and being able to reach like you people here, like it's wild. It's changed everything for me. It's really brought my, like, business wise, it's brought my brain somewhere else, where I'm like thinking about what's my application in 360 photo. How can I make an exhibit that's virtual, that is just up there in the cloud, and you could go visit whoever you are whenever you want to, and how you can monetize that, and how you could make partnerships with people that are like halfway around the world. And it's changed so many things so far in my practice, and that's it. It's kind of a double-edged sword too at the same time, because it's so tempting to do everything. Because you're like, oh, okay, I'll just hire a guy in like Vancouver, like you say, like I'll hire that guy, he'll do that. I'll do another thing, should be good. But there's always that little part like, ooh. Sometimes you do have to be in person for certain things, and that's kind of the trade-off. But hey, times are what they are right now, so I can stay at home and still have fun making art. I'm all for it.
I had forgotten that the sound studio was a beer cooler, because we
yeah it was. Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
That's ingenuity in action right there.
In action.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember this, but a lot of the time I would have my laptop with me so I could be watching the English voiceovers from the corner store where you guys were operating. So it was like I was there too. So, I mean, that's stuff that like you couldn't have done a couple of years ago. So it really made that a lot more and a lot cheaper too. We saved so much money by not having to fly me out across the country every other week. Would have killed our budget just on that alone. So yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Liz, I noticed you said in the that CARFAC has is the national body for artists and artists' copyrights, and that's interesting in that it's a way to protect the individual artists and their work. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, actually, I guess they're like the union for artists in the country, and including Indigenous artists. And they really advance the idea of copyright, trademark, patents, everything that's related to your specific work. And right now, their bigger initiative is the basic income. They're working on basic income with RAV in Quebec to really push that agenda forward as well. But yeah, so on the CARFAC website, they have all of the information about copyright and how to protect your work. And also CARFAC produces the minimum fee schedule that artists should be paid. And I want to stress minimum. It's the minimum. You can pay as much as you want, but these are the minimums. And the same with IMA, the Independent Media Arts Alliance. They also have minimum rates. So pay more.
Yeah, yeah. And NIMAC is then is a part of IMA. Is that right? That's the Indigenous Pacific.
Yes, and they're working on a couple of projects right now, actually, with Jennifer at Video Pool. Jennifer Smith, who's their distributor. Yeah.
Yeah, the National Indigenous Media Arts Coalition.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're there as well. But some things, that's the thing, because it's one thing to have particular personal work, and that's what everyone here today is talking about, their own personal work. It's different with when you look at community, like the stories we have in our community, you know, if they're shared, how does that, because Canada's copyright law is based on the individual. They don't recognize communal ownership of or stewardship really of stories. And
there's a couple of things in there actually. So CARFAC right now, we are working on an Indigenous protocols and intellectual property project. Luann Neal is the author of the work, and
fantastic. Yeah,
I know I'll be talking to you actually probably later in the week, Monique.
Great.
As one of our
Is it on their website?
No, we're working on it. It won't be done until maybe mid-December. It'll launch. So
fantastic.
But one of the ideas, again, around the idea of copyright and knowledge and ownership within a First Nation, Métis, or Inuit community and or territory, how you can use those images and what the family rights to those images are. So we're developing a resource guide and toolkit so we know, not just for the individual artists, but for organizations. So a gallery couldn't exhibit a work. I'm Métis, so I can't do works like I can't do works like that. So that's Bracken's work. So he's very West. Yeah, he's very West Coast. I can't do West Coast. So, but the gallery needs to know that. So I can't go to a gallery, put up a show that I'm, you know, copying West Coast work, and the gallery allows that. So there's two ways within the protocols and knowledge that we're looking to split, I guess, within that resource guide.
Yes, and I know that the Indigenous Screen Office is also looking at protocols. They're starting with the protocol document from Imaginative, and then they're going to work on it around digital. And we've got ICMI has a digital strategies grant, and we're looking specifically at protocols and the idea around knowledge transference protocols, as well as community or family
and
protocols.
Jason Lewis, do you guys know Jason?
Yep.
So Jason Lewis, they also just put out a protocols document. It's almost 300 pages.
Wow.
and
Who put
protocols
it out?
and
Did he put it out through, is he at Concordia or?
yeah. And he also looked at 3D. What's that place? Like Dom, you wanted to create your world. What? Not is it Minecraft where you go create a world?
Well,
What's
you
that
do
place?
that.
Like the video game?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Is it?
the video game was kind of like Lego. That's Minecraft. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you could do your piece in Minecraft.
Oh, you could do it in almost anything, really.
Mm,
Fabulous.
yeah.
One of the things I think
Oh, I found it.
with that makes me think like hopeful anyway for the future as it relates to like the issue of us protecting our word is the proliferation of indigenous artists who are becoming more prominent, whereas in the
Mhm.
past it's still very difficult for us to gain purchase in these fields and in the entertainment industry, but we're starting to see more prominent indigenous artists and it's becoming less, well, it's still difficult I think a lot of the time for non-indigenous Canadians to identify own voices and to find authenticity, I think, but it's
Yeah.
getting a lot easier, and it's getting, I think, in that way harder for people to appropriate our stuff, and we're seeing people exposed who are maybe not as authentic as we might like to see, and I think that way we all have a bit of a shared responsibility to call out people who are
Yeah.
appropriating those things and doing that, especially people who have voices and have social media platforms and have followings and stuff. So I think that, maybe it's not optimal by any stretch, but I think it's something that gives me some hope for the future, is that like we're starting to see more native voices that are easily identifiable that people can trust.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Right now, Imaginative has started. It just started today, and they've got a number of VR 360 video games, interactive web. It's called In Digital Works, and you see the people who are doing these, like Monagar, Megan Byrne, Brett Levy, or Levy, I'm not sure which. There was a few others, Amanda Strong. So these are people who are really forerunners and trailblazers in the VR field. And they're also looking at, the 360 to help with language learning so they weren't able, we didn't have that before. We didn't have this many artists doing this kind of work. And it's really interesting to see how these digital tools help us tell our stories in a way that, because it's more accessible now. There is still the digital divide. Dominic, you were talking about your connectivity up in Temiskaming. And I know in Rapid Lake, you got to stand beside the school and hold your mouth right, and you might get cell service. People have to get satellite for the most part. They have fiber, but it only goes to the school, to the band office, and to the health center. And so if anybody else wants internet, they've got to get satellite. And it's just not affordable for people. So there's that economic digital divide, as well as the connectivity and having the actual hardware within the communities. It's better in KZ, I think, because there's a cable. You can get cable in KZ. I'm pretty sure you can, right? Pretty sure. Is that right?
There's a few different things, but like, for example, even like when I was working on Kagagi, I spent a lot of the time in Ottawa. That's where we were doing the writing of the show. And I think APTN got kind of used to being able to have me on call whenever they needed to talk to me, like executives and whatnot. And I was trying to explain to them, look, Kitigan ZB is not a remote community by any stretch, but it's not going to be this way. There's going to be certain areas where I'm not going to get a cell phone signal. And they couldn't wrap their heads around it because we were dealing with the Vancouver office. And they're just like, we've been trying to call you all morning. And I'm like, unless I stand in this one corner like the friggin' Blair Witch Project, I don't get a cell phone signal. I don't know what you want me to do. So that's just the realities of technology, and especially as it relates to First Nations communities.
I have the same problem in my house.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, can I just make a comment?
Absolutely.
It's about, information that's, misuse, or like I normally don't have a problem with the copyright. I used to just stick a big copyright right over my images before I release them to the world. Because I think I had one incident where my image was used without my permission, but I can't recall all the details. But anyhow, I think Jay is right. When people are starting to recognize when there's a copyright or infringement issue. So because people are gonna say something, we're not going to sit idly by and let this happen anymore. Like, people are being called out. And yeah, so the same thing for I think, though, at the same time, we as Indigenous artists or people with any work, even if we're a ceremonial person, we have to be careful. We have to be careful with our medicines. It can happen with our medicines, like you see where that has gone. It's happened with our ceremonies. I see pictures of ceremonies, and and I see our ceremony, like, from our territory out in Europe now, and I'm like, what is going on here? So things definitely can get out of hand. Stories. I have an incident of like a story. I was a band counselor with KZ, and we have a big, thick book of our stories from our relatives from the past. And this anthropologist just came to the community, and he wanted to meet with some of us, and so he was asking for permission, and he chose 10 stories out of this book. And so we discussed it with some of the elders, and I was a counselor, I was a representative, and we decided, no, this is our story. These are our stories. If anybody's going to tell them, it's going to be us. So that's what we decided. And we had asked them, why do you want to sell these or publish these stories in your book? He said, for to share with the public, for people to know. I said, oh, well, that's where things can go bad. I think stories, our stories, my grandmother's story was in there, actually. And so I was like, no, that's our stories. And what ended up happening was, this guy went to the bank counselor, chief and council, and the rest of them, and asked their permission, apparently, and they gave him permission. So I'm like, man, I don't know. What do you do? So anyways, he's making money off of our stories, and I have a problem with that. Yeah, I just wanted to share that. It just, we have to be careful these days, as Anishinaabe people, what we put out there in the world as well. I think.
It's a weird spot we're stuck in, because I think what ends up happening a lot of the times, if you look at it, like I was saying, there used to be a lot more books by non-native people about us, even fiction, television, films that were being made by non-Indigenous people. Where things get tough, though, is when we start to enter those fields. A lot of the time, to executives, to publishers, to film studios, television networks, we end up kind of put in that box where they think that's the only thing we can do. So a lot of the time, people end up being stuck telling the same types of stories over and over, because that's what non-Indigenous people, that's all they'll do. That's all they'll let us do. So until we start seeing more native networks, native film studios, native publishers, and things like that, we're stuck seeing the same kinds of things. And, I had a talk with one publisher once who asked me to take part in an anthology and said, do you happen to have a story about Wendigo? And I'm like, why would you dictate to me what I can and can't do? Like, that's crazy to me. That's something that, again, is like, I was giving a talk to a bunch of youth in Vancouver, and we were talking about Wendigo, and I asked them if they were familiar, these kids from around British Columbia. And they said, no, they'd never heard of Wendigo. So I told them a little bit about our beliefs. And I said, do you have anything, in your own legends like Wendigo? And they said, well, we have Sasquatch, but it's not a legend. It's real. And that's what I try to tell people, is you need to understand you're not talking about myth, you're not talking about legends, you're talking about reality. And that's something that, you know, I think like
It's just
for us,
it's just like in our community. It was put out there that Hogaginity was a legend or a myth. No, that's real.
so
No?
it's tough because a lot of the time those are the things that the entertainment industry, I can't speak to anything else, but a lot of the time that's what the entertainment industry wants from us, and we end up getting shoehorned into doing the same type of things over and over because that's the value they see in us, and we need to start making our own outlets and things more. But it's tough, especially in the present economy, when you're looking at like what COVID is doing to the entertainment industry. Who knows where things are even going to be in another couple of years?
Sorry, that's can't hear me. Yeah, that's absolutely true. We don't know. On the one hand, since COVID, uh, I've never been busier, you know, with the work. I had this great grant where I was supposed to go travel. You know, I was going to go to Haida. I was going to go all across Canada and work with people on the ground to have gatherings and how discussions about this sort of thing. But then COVID hit, so now I'm looking at doing online. This is kind of what sparked these discussions, why we're doing these panels, because it's a way for us to be able to have these conversations online and still be able to talk to each other about these kind of topics, you know. So instead of going out there, I'll be, you know, having phone calls and Zooms and, you know, all of that sort of thing. One of the things that, though, Don, that you mentioned that really struck me, because I've had this conversation recently, is about the idea of being able to go farther, you know, eventually maybe, you know, we'll have people from all over the world who could, you know, come and hear us and participate. So the idea of community is changing. You know, I wanted to start this with Algonquin community because it's Algonquin territory, and I felt it was important that we heard from our own community before we moved on to talk about other things. But eventually, you know, I mean, it changes community. Because it's not just, you know, people in Ottawa or people on Algonquin territory. Eventually it becomes people from all over the world. And how does that affect, and how do you think that will affect how we express ourselves, our culture, you know, because you're learning and speaking and conversing and, you know, with people from a larger community, a different community than just, you know, the community that you would normally be sharing with.
Well, I see it kind of like a lot like online gaming, because there's a parallel there, because there's all these people that don't know each other at all, and that after, you know, a few years of playing together, working towards whatever game they're playing, they're like family. And I've already felt that in my last residency, the virtual one. I wanted to go hang out with them. Like, I missed the weekly meeting, and I barely knew these people 2 months before. And I think that's the really cool part. Like, it's like, you know, like there's all tradition, all that stuff, and that. But I think the thing that I always think about is like, where can I find the human part in whatever I'm doing, and how can I connect in that way? Like, I don't care what background you're from, who you are, what you do. If you're here to connect with me, and, you know, if you want to do a project, it's that idea. Like, how we've never had that chance ever. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a way to find people. My cousin's son is the same. His group of friends, most of them are from gaming, and a lot of them live in Seattle. So once a year, I mean, he's been gaming with these same guys for years. And now, you know, once a year he'll go visit Seattle and stay for a couple of weeks. That's where he takes his holidays, and he goes and stays for a couple of weeks and kind of couch surfs with all the different people who he's been playing these video games with online. And it's, yeah, it's a real group. It's a connection, you know, of people who would otherwise never have spoken to each other. So it really opens that communication with people. There's this group called I Am For, Indigenous Matriarchs For, and Loretta Todd, names escape me. I'm really wicked bad for names, but they had this conference online, and there were people from the States, there were people from all over the place. And the same thing, I'm working with the National Film Board on a virtual reality lab. And these were 6 different artists from all over Canada and the States. And they were taking, they were emerging artists, and they were taking an idea to the point where it would be pitch ready. So they were creating a trailer and, you know, the whole idea of their virtual reality game or virtual reality experience. And, you know, to have these conversations with these people who are from all over, you know, it was just what is really interesting about the Indigenous community. There are value similarities in how we view the world. I've even heard stories from, there was a mestizo guy from Mexico was telling me some of their creation stories. And Alice, they were the same stories that I heard from Jacob. We have those same stories in our community. And it gave me chills to think that they had these same creation stories. So when you're saying, you know, it's not myth or legends, it's true. You gotta, you know, you gotta place a whole different thought on what, you know, what these stories mean and what they mean to our, you know, everyday lives now, how they apply even now.
Well, I don't know about you, the rest of you, but I know, like, I don't know about, you know, my dad's generation. I think it was rare. Like I said, my dad was up and down the East Coast, but I know, you know, my dad didn't meet a lot of Native people from other parts of North America. And I know for myself, I was at a comic convention in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we set up my big banner with the big Kagagi thing. And one of the first groups of people who walked up to me were some Navajo people, and they said, Kagagi, what does that mean? And I said, Raven. And they said, oh, our word is Gagi. So we started comparing languages. And a lot of words are very, very, very similar, very close. And those are things that, like, you know, we're taught. I don't want to go off on the education system too hard, but we're taught a certain thing in that, you know, we didn't move too far and we lived in these small villages. And whenever people tell me that, I say, have you ever heard of, I can't think of the name of it. I'm getting old too, but there was a mound building society in Illinois, I believe, that was a city pre-contact the size of Montreal or Washington. And I tell people that, I'm like, whenever you are told certain things, you have to understand the narrative behind what we're being taught, what's in those history books. It's an excuse for them to say that they brought us civilization. And the truth of the matter is, it was just a different kind of civilization here. And we were traveling, we were going here, we were going there. At one event I was at, I was talking with a guy who was from Mexico as well. And his sister was still there. She's an archaeologist in Mexico. And he said they were digging up this pyramid. And it was one of those pyramids that has a flat top that doesn't go all the way to a point, but it has a flat top. And they hollowed out, they looked at the stairs going into the lower areas of the pyramid, and they thought they were solid, but they were hollow. And when they opened them up, they found all these parchments. They're like 5 feet high parchments. And it was almost like a town crier you'd have in Europe, where somebody would take the parchment and unravel it and read the news of what was going on to the community at large. And in one of them, it actually said, we are awaiting the arrival of the Algonquin delegation. Now, this is pre-contact. So I said, are you serious? Can I see this? And he had his sister email me screenshots of it with the translation. So there's a lot we were taught that is being challenged, because now Indigenous people are starting to connect and we're starting to share. We're going, oh yeah, you check this out. And that's one way that I think the internet has really helped us all. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's you know, there was a very sophisticated network of trade. I talked to there's Ian Badgley is an archaeologist here at the National Capital Commission, and he told me one time about how in this area, because this was a meeting area that Algonquins hosted, the trade, this was like a center for trade. And he said it was interesting to see that, you know, the Avaz say that they found had patterns on it that came from the southern states, but the seeds that were inside of it came from like South America. So they had traveled hand to hand, or, you know, all the way up here. And when you look at corn, it was the Mayans who created corn, engineered corn. Corn cannot grow without human beings. And we're at the northern point of where corn can grow. But the idea that it was brought from Mayan territory all the way up here, and that it was, you know, the Mohawks had it in south of the St. Lawrence River. So, you know, like the sophistication of the trade routes, and they say like 90% of our people passed. They died at point of contact. So you know that there were, you know, larger cities and larger places for trade, and you know, like this whole idea that I don't believe that we were the savages, you know.
No, if I could just touch on something I'd said, because it bothers me, I couldn't remember the name. This place in Illinois was apparently 8 miles from St. Louis. It was called Cahokia, and they said at its peak it was, again, a city the size of Washington or Montreal, with a population similar to that of London.
Wow.
And
That's
that
fabulous.
absolutely demolishes a lot of the lies that were taught about Indigenous people and that we lived here.
Absolutely.
I'm really sorry I have to leave. My dog is being very demanding right now. I tried to keep her, but no, she has to go. So I have to let her out. Yes.
Okay.
This has been really great. Thank you so much. I really look forward to the next one as well. Great meeting you all, and thank you for sharing your stories.
Well, thanks for coming out, Liz. We appreciate that you're here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Best wishes to your dog.
Yes, Lucy. Ah,
So, nice to meet you.
nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm looking up that place in Illinois. So you know that there were other places, you know.
Hey, I spoke of that publicly for the first time. I think I was actually at Ottawa University, and I was giving a guest lecture. I had done this book called First Hunt. It was about a kid who, back in the day, pre-contact, we began hunting, apparently, from what I know anyway, probably around 13 or 14. And there was a story about that. And somebody said to me, one of the students asked me the question of, in the book, we depict Algonquin hunters using a bow and arrow, and they said, we were taught that you didn't have that until contact. And I said, well, we have some arrowheads in my community that we've independently carbon dated to, I believe, 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. So I think we might have to disagree. And I said, if you want proof of what I'm saying, I know it's tough because you're all sitting here in university and you're all paying exorbitant amounts of tuition fees. And I say that as a guy who taught at university, you know, but you're all paying this money for some things that, you know, you're not really getting the full story on. So to wit, I said, how many of you are on Facebook or Twitter? And out of 150 students, probably about 140 hands go up. And I said, follow me on Facebook and Twitter. And when we get out of here, I'll post some stuff about this place called Cahokia. And I talked to them about it. And I posted some links to something like National Geographic, a real reputable source, so nobody would, you know, accuse me of lying or anything. But it's something that, again, I think non-Indigenous people are not going to hear about unless they follow us. So it's great to see so many artists getting platforms and followings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just looked it up, and it said between 1050 and 1100 AD, the population was between 10,200 and 15,300 people.
It's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, I mean, 40,000 at its peak.
Yeah. And I've had people ask me in my own career, like, if you could do another TV show, what would you like to do, or a film? And I'm like, with enough of a budget, I'd like to do something about that. I think that would be really cool. And I think it would be good for our kids to see that kind of stuff, you know, because
Yeah.
again, we're not being taught that reality.
No, we're not at all. And it needs to be. I got in trouble with the Western Quebec School Board. I was homeschooling Liam for about a year and a half, and they wanted me to send the curriculum that I was going to be using. And so I told them, I said, okay, I'll send you my curriculum, but I'll tell you right now, the history that my son will be learning will be the Algonquin history in this territory.
Mhm.
And they didn't say anything, but a few days later, I got a call from Children's Services, like Children's Aid, you know, Family Services, saying that I wasn't educating my child properly. So luckily I belong to this. They have in Quebec this parents association. It's the Homeschooling Parents Legal Defense Association, which kind of tells you the mindset, you know, why do they have a legal defense association? Anyway, I belong to that. So I got in touch with them and they straightened it all out. But I wondered about other Indigenous parents, like who didn't have the resources that I have, you know, to have a file opened on them at, you know, the Children's Aid Society, you know, for reasons like, you know, I'm not going to teach my child French history, you know, I'm going to teach him Algonquin history. But yeah, they never said a word to me, but.
Alice, I'm wondering if you could answer me on this. Don't we have an actual book of objects in KZ that we're trying to get back from the Smithsonian in Washington?
I think so. Yeah.
See, I think there's, from what I remember hearing, there was a lot of stuff about like tools and things like that in there.
Yep. Yep. If you want to know more, just probably ask Sylvia. I think I saw that book, and yeah.
That's
Wow.
interesting too, because there's a lot of stuff in there that, again, mainstream society says that we didn't have, that, you know, we have proof of, and it's all locked away in these vaults at museums and whatnot.
Yeah.
Do you all know the work of Tanya Lucan Linklater?
I'm not familiar.
Tanya Lucan Linklater. She's an Alutiiq artist who's on Nipissing territory right now. And some of her work, she goes in and dances to some of the belongings that the institutions have taken. I just, as you're talking about this, this very real problem that keeps happening, I thought I would kind of bring in her work for you all. You might be interested in that.
That's something that's interesting, that for Indigenous artists. I wonder if either of you, the other panelists, ever feel any kind of conflict with these kind of organizations, because like I said, I've been very outspoken about shortcomings of the education system, and particular institutions in those institutions that I've later worked for, and I've been critical of certain Indigenous treatment or portrayal by, for example, the Museum of History. Now I have a permanent installation at the Museum of History. So I wonder if you ever feel, if you go to the history hall that they opened, I guess around 2 weeks ago. The new. Yeah, so when you walk in, it's supposed to tell the history of Canada from creation to modern day.
Yeah.
So the first thing you see when you walk in is this giant, like 20-foot screen showing the Algonquin creation story, with Otter going to bring up a piece of dirt, and it's read in Algonquin by Joan Tenasco.
That's right.
So I did the artwork for that. So it was a little tense there, because I've said a lot of things publicly about the museum and Indian artifacts, and and so I'm just curious as to you guys. Do you ever feel any kind of push and pull when you're doing stuff? If
yes.
you feel about those things.
I remember I was there at the opening. I did a welcome to the territory there, and there was a gentleman there that night. He was the chief operating officer from the Library and Archives Canada, and he contacted me to sit on this Indigenous advisory circle, which I did. I accepted. So there was a whole bunch of people from across Canada who were archivists and whatnot, and from coast to coast to coast. And anyways, I couldn't take it anymore. I'm a person who cannot like, let's say, I can't handle stuff.
I
So
hear you.
basically what it felt to me like was it was tokenism, and I called it out and I left. I'm like, this is tokenism. I can't. So I have a problem with that.
Exactly.
Me,
Exactly.
me, it's kind of a different in the way. I kind of play with tokenism. I'm like, all right, you want me? All right, but give me something. you know, get a contact, whatever. It's me. My problem is because the style of art that I do, I feel like this weird pressure, like because I'm not traditional in any way, and if I do go anything close to traditional, I'll make fun of it straight up. There's no joke. It's there. That's my style, and I actually do it on purpose so I don't get pigeonholed into that native artist thing, right?
Mm.
Because it'd be easy to like rip off Norval Morisot for the rest of my life and just do it in a digital version. No problem. It's doable, but it's not interesting. And yeah, that's the kind of the reverse one. You know how everybody's trying to help out the natives, but at the same time, they have an idea what native is. It's like it's got a whole bunch of things, man. It's got way more than that, and it's gonna take a while for it to change. Like first, we're finally just getting some kind of presence. So as time goes by, I think it'll hopefully get better. Here's hoping.
I hope so. I
The
hope
way I
so.
always explain it is, it's up to us as Indigenous artists to find balance between evolving as artists and using these digital mediums and these new techniques and new avenues of art creation, combining that with traditional, because we are the generation who's the first to really have the opportunities to work with those means. So I think there's a lot of people who maybe expect us, even within Indigenous communities, expect us to stick to traditional art. And we have to challenge. That's what art does. Art challenges and it pushes boundaries, and it's a responsibility we've got, if that's where our heart is to follow our heart and to do what's in our heart.
Agree
Exactly.
more. It's awesome.
Yeah, because I mean, we're not stuck in the past. We're a breathing, living, growing culture and language, and this is just a new tool. It's just a different tool, and one that I think is more works better with the way that we have been taught, like the oral tradition, right? Passing on knowledge by speaking, by watching, by doing. Writing is not conducive to that, but using digital tools is more conducive to that. So we're better able to express ourselves because the tools are better for us to be able to do that. And however that is, there's so many wonderful artists who combine that whole traditional culture with contemporary expression. And I think that'll move our culture forward. I think that we can't just say, what were we before contact, and what have we become as a result of colonization. And you're right about, we're the first generation to actually have these tools. I laugh about that because my son grew up, it was just always in his environment. It was just there, but I've had to adapt. I keep having to learn again. And, I hate the learning curve, but he doesn't even think about it. It's just an extension of his environment. It's just always been there. So that's, where I'm hopeful for the next generations coming up, that they will, be able to take it that next step. Because
we have to keep in mind too, again, the double-edged sword, so to speak, of technology, it keeps coming up. But when you look at our kids, our native youth today are the first generation who've never known life without the internet. And when we see these news about Indigenous issues, if you read the comments and the talkbacks, there's a lot of negativity, overt racism. I remember when I was a kid, when I saw what was going on in Oka during the Oka crisis. So I wasn't a little kid. I was probably 14 or so. But I remember being blown away because the only place I'd ever lived in Canada was Kitigan-Zibi. And there was a lot of racism in the town of Maniwaki and the towns around the area. But to me, I'm like, well, they're small towns. That's how small towns are, right? And then to watch the news and see people in Montreal burning effigies of Indigenous people, I went, oh, wow. So it's like that even in the big cities, like, holy, you know what I mean? Because I never really been to, Toronto or Edmonton or, you know what I mean? So that was an eye-opening thing for me. And I wonder sometimes about the impact of that on our youth, the fact that they've never known life without being exposed to that on a constant basis. Whereas for me, it was a surprise as a teenager, but for kids now, it's a constant surrounding of them. And I think as artists, we have a responsibility too, to remind kids of their value and remind kids of the fact that they're important and that they're loved. And that, again, this is not a dying culture. We can't be an emerging, vibrant, and dynamic culture and people if we don't evolve and adapt. And I think that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to take it to the next steps. We have to, keep what is good and pass that along. And then, we have to let it go because it's up to the kids to do, just like, what we inherited from our parents. Now at least there's another generation between the residential schools, that's why my dad said, no, he took us to Toronto. We were raised in Toronto because otherwise I would have gone to residential school. My brothers would have gone. There were so many people up in Rapid Lake who did go, but now at least there's that generation removed, even though, they talk about how trauma can be passed on through our DNA,
I wrote a story about that too. That was published in an anthology last year. They call it epigenetics, and it's science of how trauma can be passed on through DNA. So my brother is a biologist at Concordia, and I was talking to him about it, saying, "Is this something we see in the animal kingdom?" And he was able to give me several instances, for example, of like certain fish that, if, for example, their parents are attacked by a certain kind of predator, their children will be born with an innate fear of the scent of that predator. So we can see it in biology. So the idea with epigenetics is that when I was researching this story, they found that there were different universities in the States. I think one of them was in like Tennessee or something, and they found that trauma could be passed down through DNA for as many as 14 generations. So I always tell people, you have to be kind to yourself and you have to forgive yourself, because we're carrying around a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily our own. And the triumph of Indigenous people is that we've never let trauma define us as people. We let our own experiences, we let our love, our community, our culture, who we are define us, not that trauma. So, but we have to be aware that this is a thing that we're carrying around, because 14 generations goes back a long time. So.
Twice the 7 generations we talk about.
Yeah. 14 generations. Well, how many years would that even be? You know what I mean? Like
14, 20, 280 years.
Right?
Yeah. Well, they say a generation is 20 years.
Okay. So it's
right?
pretty wild to think about, and we're just learning about that science now. I think it's still relatively, just being discovered, but some of the studies are really eye-opening. It's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, I just started looking at online. Heritable changes in gene expression. Oops. Oh, interesting. That's interesting. That would be something to express with through art, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
That idea of changes, physical changes or physiological changes, as well as psychological changes as a result of trauma.
I think we're learning about it too, insofar as like more people are being diagnosed with things that they weren't in the past, and we're seeing a lot more in so far as like depression and anxiety and those kind of things, and that's all probably related to the field of epigenetics.
Wow.
Again, I'm not a doctor, so I can only say my brother's probably better suited to speak it than I'm just some blockhead. some meat that probably draws pretty well, but that's my understanding of the science anyway.
Oh, they're saying keto is, or keto? They say keto, high fat, low carb diet might epigenetically open up DNA and improve mental ability. So there we go.
Huh.
We got to go eat fish
Yeah.
and butter.
Yeah. I'm going to go grab some fry bread with some butter on right now. Thank you.
That's what it all boils down to, man. It's food.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're at 9 o'clock already. I wonder, do you guys have any kind of wrap up sort of things to say that you want to end the discussion?
I'd like to apologize if I talk too much. I get really excited about this stuff. So I apologize if I ran my mouth too much, but thanks for having me. It was a really interesting discussion, and I really appreciate both of your time and your time, Nick, and thank you all for having me as part of this. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks. No, I was looking forward to this discussion because it's not often I get to be in even a virtual room with Algonquin artists to have these kind of conversations. It's other Indigenous people for sure, but not necessarily people who come from the same community, the same nation.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? And then we'll have Albert do a close if Albert's still there.
Yep.
Albert, are you there?
Yeah, can I say something?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about intellectual property and things like this, but I'm surprised that nobody mentioned the fact of people who don't have any Indigenous bloodline whatsoever, but are identifying as us, and they're building canoes as identified as Indigenous canoe builders. They're storytelling as Indigenous storytellers. They're doing everything. They're writing plays, whatever. And people like Joseph Boyden. It's I think there should be a conversation about that kind of thing that we're plagued with in our community, because one day, if we don't do anything, they will erase us and only their voice is going to be heard, and our voice won't be heard anymore if we don't do something about it.
No, I think you're right. I know that with upcoming, like the organization Indigenous Screen Office, the man who runs it, the ED there is Jesse Wente. And I asked him about that because, in with the grants and whatnot, people just self-ID and, there isn't a real search that's being done around whether or not people are authentically Indigenous. And when I asked him about that self-ID, he said there's no such thing. He says these organizations that are coming into being now, and he said that if people are self-IDing, they have to prove connection to community. And I mean, I get it with people who have been, removed, people, 60 scoop, millennial scoop, that kind of thing. But the importance to him was this connection to community. So if, well, even with the people who've been removed, there's a trail, right? There's some kind of trail that they're now starting to release, and so they're able to get that kind of information. But just to say, like my grandmother was a Mohawk. He said, if someone tells me their grandmother was a Mohawk, I don't care. He says, but if they say my grandmother was a Mohawk, and these are the steps that I've taken to connect to my community, and here is my connection to my community now. He says they might not still get the money, but at least we'll have a conversation.
I can confirm that. I'm actually on the called the Arts Council of Quebec, of one of the jurists in there on the native arts part, and we've gotten a few of those, who paid for the card kind of people, and you see it right away. You see it right away. There's zero connection to the community. It's really it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I wonder how do
Yeah,
they do that though? When, for example, you have somebody who maybe doesn't have connection to a community but is on a banned list.
yeah, that's true.
Because I've always wondered about that. Like I personally think it's getting really hard because there's a pretty well-known author in the States, and we follow each other on Twitter, and we've always been supportive of each other's work. And then recently, a couple of months ago, there was a indigenous news outlet in the States that questioned her authenticity as an indigenous person. And it's getting hard because I don't know, like I don't have any knowledge about indigenous communities in Arizona or Colorado or Utah or something. So I think we really got to tread carefully with that idea of defining indigeneity. It's a bit of a minefield, and it's hard for us to know who's legit and who's not.
Hmm.
And anyone could just be targeted. It's easy, I think. Dom, I'm not sure. Like, did you grow up in a reserve or?
No, I grew up various little towns in northern Ontario.
Because I know for
Oh.
Alice and myself, like we both grew up in a reserve, and I enjoy as an Indigenous artist a certain amount of privilege from that because everybody knows I'm from Kitigan-Zibi and I lived there almost my entire life. But I can't imagine, it must be a little scary if you're an Indigenous person who's never lived in your home community. When you see other people being targeted this way, it's like I don't know, you know what I mean? Like it's a real touchy thing, I think.
Hmm.
Well, that's
What makes
that's what's funny. Yeah. Well, like in like my situation, we'd go visit. Like it's just literally
Me
like
too.
an hour away from where we live. It's just my dad would have to go move according to whatever job he could get in the mill or a mine, whatever. It's just life up here.
Mhm.
But yeah, you can, it makes you wonder, like those who just have the heritage, but well, like the bloodline, but none of the actual cultural heritage. It's like, what do you do? Who are these
Yeah.
people? We get them on every now and then. We get, because I work for the council in communications, so I see like tons of people call in. My grandmother's grandmother from over here might be part of our band. It's like, okay,
Yep.
what's the cutoff? Is there a cutoff? Ugh, there's so many things that we could spend an entire series.
It'll have to be another panel. It's so true though. I mean, what I was talking to this one woman from Paraguay, and she was saying the difference between, because they're mestizo, and she was saying the way that the Spanish colonized, it's mixed blood, but they don't know which community they're from. They know they're indigenous, but they don't know what nation, or down there, I guess, what tribe that they're from. And she said, and the thing is, the difference in North America is that we've capitalized being indigenous. So there's money attached to being indigenous. Whereas in Paraguay, there's no money attached. And if you admit to being indigenous, not only is there no money, you're not going to get the job, you're not going to get, so people tend not to. I mean, much like our parents' generation and grandparents' generation, where there was absolutely no benefit, to being indigenous. They didn't promote that they were, or teach the kids the language or pass on the culture, that kind of thing. But now that there is this monetary, there's this, there's money attached. It's the same thing with the Métis. The Métis have a huge discussion around this, political, because prior to the Métis being entrenched in the Constitution, there was nobody was saying they were Métis. But then once there was money attached because they were entrenched in the Constitution, then all of a sudden there's, I've had it described to me that, they talk about the homeland, the Red River and that kind of thing, because those were the people who were identifying as Métis when it was unpopular, that they always identified. Whereas these other communities had the same culture and the same mixture of indigenous and non, but they never identified as such. And they only started doing so after Métis was entrenched and there was money. And I don't know, it's not my place to say either way. It's up, I mean, that's their argument. I'm just glad, I don't have to deal with that.
But I think, this is the first time I've ever actually heard this discourse. I've never actually heard a group of people discuss this. all I've heard is this is how it works. And I'm like, I think a bunch of us, you know, indigenous artists, creators, thinkers, scholars, academics, whatever, need to have these kind of discussions and talk about the stuff, because that's the only way we move forward, you know, and it's important to hear other people's point of views, even if we don't necessarily agree with them, because if we don't, how do we ever consider things that might not occur to us? So
Can I just add something?
Mhm.
I keep on waiting for Munich to say, okay, we're closing now, but the conversation keeps on going.
So you get a little, get a little
So anyways, I may as well jump in then.
Yeah, I'll just keep talking, guys.
No, I was gonna say, like, you're absolutely right. Like, this conversation is very much needed, and actually, a lot of people are talking about these types of things. Like, for instance, it ties in a little bit to local community politics, because if we had control over our community memberships, maybe there might not be as much of an issue, because we would control like who our community members are. So it's tied in a little bit with that, I think. If we had what's that called there?
Sovereignty.
yeah.
Well, that, but where you define who your community members are. I forget what that's called. But anyways, so that. And the other thing is that it ties into like what's happening right now, is that our people are everywhere now, right? The band member, when I ran for band council, I thought I knew my community.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I knew the community members. And then I get this list and I'm like, holy moly. I didn't even recognize half of the names. Like, it was really unbelievable. And I was like, who are these people? So anyways, so they have no really connection to the community, other than that they have relatives in the community, because they've never set foot on the community and on the reserve. And I don't know. So the other thing, last thing I wanted to mention was, I heard an elder say, like, when we're talking about, if you look at this, at the prophecy belt of the seven fires, there's one prophet there who said that there's going to be a new race of people who are going to be coming in, and they're going to be like the Métis people, because they're combined. And I think this is like what's happening right now, because our people are like combining, like we're falling in love everywhere now. You know what I mean? Not just in different, going to another res, like we're all over the place. We're all over the world now. So our people are evolving.
Yeah,
I don't know if
that's
that's the right word. So I don't know. So things are getting complicated.
yeah. I mean, in so many years, yeah, absolutely no control over who was a member. I don't think Rapid Lake has that control either. Actually, I don't know how if someone applies to be a membership, whether they just have to prove family tie, or I don't think it goes to band council. I think they can actually just apply through Indian Affairs.
Depends on your code. Us in our case, we have our own electoral code and our own laws and all that stuff. So it's a little different.
Code.
Okay.
Citizenship code.
Citizenship.
We call it electoral code here, but it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a whole bunch of political stuff. Like, that's a little too late to take on at 9:15.
Yeah, yeah. I thought KZ had that too. I thought though that they did have that, because I know they don't take transfers. I know that the band office or the band council can decide, that if someone applies to be a member, that they don't really take transfers. So I thought they had some self-determination around who becomes a member. But I don't know what the deal is in Rapid Lake.
Okay, Monique, I'm tired now, okay?
Okay, yeah, me too. So Albert, can you do a closing for us, please?
before I do that, let me say this. Back in the mid-1990s, there was a so-called elder who was self-identified, and as a matter of fact, Kitigan had to send a lawyer's letter to him to cease and desist promoting himself as an Algonquin elder. But he was saying about that there was going to be what he called the Rainbow Warriors. And this is in the mid-1990s, and he said that by the 2012 there would be no such thing as a full-blooded Indian, and it was going to be up to the so-called the prophecy of the Rainbow Warriors to teach the white people how to live well and respectful. And somebody told me that, and they said it was a prophecy, and I said, that's not a prophecy. I said, somebody got stoned on acid in the 60s, and they come up with that, because, as far as I'm concerned, it's the people who experience the Indian Act, like my parents, experienced the past system. They couldn't vote till 1960, and so on and so on and so on. Now that's what, to me, that's what the authentic people are. And those people who are self-identified that don't have indigenous blood in them, I'm telling you, that they are dangerous to us. And if we don't do anything about it, I'm telling you, someday we're going to be erased, and only their voice is going to be heard. Take my word for that, okay?
Okay.
With that, I want to say to the good spirit how grateful we are for everything that went well. We're grateful for everything that was shared, all the great things that were learned. We're grateful for the good words of solidarity. We're grateful for the respect that we have for, and honored we have for each other as artists, because the artist's voice is the strongest voice in the community, is to build our identity and build up our culture again. We ask you, our good spirit, to watch over all of us until we arrive to that place where we will rest tonight. We ask that when we arrive there, that we find it filled with love, health, and joy. Miigwech, I hope to see you soon.
Miigwech.
Robert. And thanks to everybody, and thanks to Anis Descharmes, who has been instrumental in getting this panel together. And I want to thank all of you, Dom, Jay, Alice, Albert, and our audience of 3. I was looking forward to a really good discussion with everybody tonight, and I think we've done that. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you again and working with you.
Thank
So,
you.
Chimigwich, everybody. We'll talk soon.
That's it.
Owabamin.
Good night. Madrasha.
Madrasha.
Awesome. That was good, eh?
Oh, yeah, I was happy with that.
Let me stop recording here.